The first round of the 2024 NHL entry draft is officially in the books, a total runtime of about 4 hours. I sound like a broken record. I feel like we're all saying the same thing every year, but that's just way too long. We definitely had our fair share of surprises in terms of where certain players were selected, but in terms of trades, we really didn't get anything, aside from teams swapping picks, moving up and down in the draft. Over the past few weeks, there was so much talk about how crazy this year's draft could potentially be with all the trades that could happen. Guys like Necas, Ehlers, Rutger McGroarty, Yaroslav Askarov are all names that were talked about as players that could be traded at the NHL draft, along with Columbus's 4th overall pick. There was a lot of talk about them potentially moving that, but we didn't get any of that, so that was definitely disappointing. There's always tomorrow, but the first round was definitely a letdown in terms of trades. But with that all being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the draft picks. 1st and 2nd overall, no surprises, Celebrini to San Jose and Artem Levshinov to Chicago. We knew Celebrini was going to be the 1st overall draft pick all year long, and based off of everything that's been reported over the last week or so, I think we all expected Chicago was going to go with Levshinov, and that's exactly what happened. 3rd overall is where we get our first big surprise, and I would say this was probably the most shocking pick of the entire first round. The Anaheim Ducks selected forward Beckett Seneca, and let me tell you, nobody in the world was more surprised than Beckett Seneca himself when his name was called by the Anaheim Ducks. His reaction was priceless. He's a prospect who really flew up everyone's draft rankings towards the end of the season. He was a beast in the playoffs for the Oshawa Generals, 10 goals and 22 points in 16 games. Heading into the draft, he's a guy I think most people expected to go anywhere in the range of picks 7 to 15, I would say. Definitely a great prospect, don't get me wrong, but it was really surprising to see Anaheim reach for him with the 3rd overall draft pick. Hopefully it pays off for them. Picks 4 and 5 went as expected. Caden Lindstrom 4th overall to the Columbus Blue Jackets, and Ivan Demidov at 5th overall to the Montreal Canadiens. I know a lot of Habs fans are very excited about that draft pick. Demidov has the potential to be one of the absolute best players from this draft class. I think he's going to be an elite top line forward for the Montreal Canadiens. After making the pick, Kent Hughes was interviewed by Elliot Friedman, and Elliot Friedman said, "The word is you coveted Ivan Demidov for a long time. Is that true?" And Kent Hughes said, "Very true." So Montreal got their guy. I think they did really well tonight. We'll talk about their other first round draft pick a little bit later. It was also a nice touch for them to have Celine Dion come out and announce this pick. 6th overall, Utah made Tija Ginla their first draft pick in franchise history, obviously not including the history of the Coyotes. You guys know what I mean. So Ginla did not end up falling into the Calgary Flames' lap 9th overall, like I know a lot of us were hoping he would. 7th overall, the Ottawa Senators selected defenseman Carter Yakimchuk. Not a surprise at all to see them go with a right shot defender. He's a guy with good size, has a fantastic shot. There's a ton of offensive upside there, and with Ottawa already having the likes of Thomas Chabot, Jake Sanderson, and Jacob Chychrun, who are all left shot defensemen, a right shot defenseman was definitely an organizational need for Ottawa, and they addressed that here. With the 8th overall pick, the Seattle Kraken selected a centerman Berkeley Catton. I absolutely love this pick by Seattle. Berkeley Catton is one of the most skilled players in the entire draft class, had 116 points in the WHL this season. He's a prospect that a lot of people thought may fall out of the top 10 due to his size, similar to Zach Benson last year, but that is not what happened. Seattle decided to take him 8th overall, and I think it's a draft pick that's going to age very well for them. Their center depth moving forward into the future is absolutely nasty with the likes of Matty Beniers, Shane Wright, and now Berkeley Catton. 9th overall, the Calgary Flames would select right shot defenseman Zane Parekh, probably the best offensive defenseman in the entire draft class. 33 goals and 96 points in 66 games this season in the OHL with Saginaw. One of the best goal scoring seasons by defensemen in their draft year in OHL history. May struggle defensively at the NHL level, but I think it's a pretty safe bet to assume Zane Parekh is the future power play quarterback for the Calgary Flames. 10th overall, the New Jersey Devils selected the unicorn of the draft, 6'7" left shot defenseman Anton Siliev. I actually like this pick for New Jersey. I don't think there's a ton of offensive upside there with Siliev, but I feel like he's a good fit for their organization. They already have dynamic young offensive defensemen like Luke Hughes and Simon Nemec, so I definitely think it makes sense for New Jersey to add a prospect to their system that projects to be an absolute beast defensively and just a nightmare to play against. With the 11th overall draft pick, their 2nd draft pick in the first round, the San Jose Sharks selected a defenseman Sam Dickinson from the London Knights. This is actually where I had Sam Dickinson going in my mock draft. I said in that video that I believe San Jose's prospect pool lacks a blue chip defensive prospect, and now they get that in Sam Dickinson. Was a little bit surprised to see them pass on Bouillon with him still on the board at 11th overall, but nonetheless, they're getting a fantastic defensive prospect in Dickinson. Moving on now to the 12th overall draft pick, the Minnesota Wild actually made a trade with Philadelphia to move up one spot from 13th to 12th, and I think with this 12th overall draft pick, they got one of the biggest steals of the first round, selecting defenseman Zeev Bouillon. I had Booyum going 3rd overall in my mock draft, the second defenseman off the board after Levshinov. Craig Button said that he believes Zeev Booyum was the best defenseman in the entire draft class. Minnesota Wild fans should be through the roof with this draft pick, and I think I speak for everybody when I say the thought of a Brock Faber-Zeev Booyum defensive pairing is absolute nightmare fuel for the rest of the NHL. With the 13th overall pick, the Philadelphia Flyers selected centerman Jet Luchenko. I saw a lot of Flyers fans pretty upset on social media that Philly decided to trade the 12th overall pick, move down a spot, decided not to take Zeev Booyum, and then reach a little bit on Jet Luchenko. I think this was a bit earlier than most people expected him to go in the first round. I think it's pretty clear Philly had their sights set on drafting a center here. Their prospect pool is pretty weak when it comes to centermen, especially after the Cutter-Gauthier trade, so I feel like that was probably their thought process here. Next up with the 14th overall selection, the Buffalo Sabres selected Finnish centerman Konsta Helenius, who was very impressive this season in the Liga as an 18-year-old, putting up 36 points in 51 games on one of the better teams in the league. He already has a pretty well-rounded 200-foot game, obviously plays a premium position at center. I think this is a really solid draft pick for Buffalo at 14th. 15th overall, the Detroit Red Wings selected Michael Brantzig-Newgard. I wanted them to go with Yzerman here, seeing everyone left on the board. I just really believe Detroit still lacks that top-end talent, and while Yzerman definitely has a lot of holes in his game, if he hits and reaches his ceiling in the NHL, that's a potential 30-40 goal scorer. The Red Wings, however, decided to go the safer route and take Brantzig-Newgard. He's a prospect that I feel like sort of cut from the same cloth as Nate Danielson and Marco Kasper. High energy, high compete, good forechecker. I'm not sure if he's ever going to become the big-time point-producing top-line forward that I think the Red Wings really need, but still a really solid prospect and projects to be a solid middle six player for Detroit. Getting into the back half of the first round now, I will admit when it comes to prospects that were selected later in the first round, my knowledge is a lot more limited than the guys that were selected at the top of the draft. 16th overall, the St. Louis Blues selected right shot defenseman Adam Juracek, who, yes, is the younger brother of David Juracek of the Columbus Blue Jackets, has played in the Czech League in each of the past 2 seasons. The numbers don't jump out at you. He did suffer a knee injury in the first game of the 2024 World Juniors, which required surgery, so he missed a lot of time, and I think that definitely hurt his draft stock a little bit. Moving on now, 17th overall, the Washington Capitals selected right shot winger Tarek Parasak, who spent this past season in the WHL with Prince George, and he dominated 105 points in 68 games. He's another prospect like Beckett Seneca who had a pretty funny reaction to being drafted. He seemed very surprised when he heard the Washington Capitals call his name. 18th overall, with the second of their 3 first-round draft picks this year, the Chicago Blackhawks selected centerman Sasha Boisvert. He's got pretty good size at the center position and was very productive in the USHL, had 36 goals and 68 points in 61 games this year. With the 19th overall pick, the Vegas Golden Knights selected winger Trevor Connolly out of the USHL, had 78 points in 52 games there this season. He's a prospect who probably would have went a lot earlier in the draft if it wasn't for off-ice concerns. I'll just say he's had a bit of a controversial past and had some off-ice issues. This is a draft pick that's probably not going to earn Vegas any fanfare, but if there's one thing we've learned about them since they've came into the NHL is that they don't care really about anyone's feelings. They just want to win. They don't care about anyone's feelings when it comes to how they work around the salary cap or when it comes to trading away fan favorites or players that they just recently acquired to free up cap space and cap dumps. And based off of this pick, obviously they have that same mindset when it comes to drafting. With the 20th overall selection, the New York Islanders were finally the team to pull the trigger on Cole Yzerman. Similar to what I said about Zeev Booyum going 12th overall to Minnesota, I think this was one of the biggest steals of the first round. Cole Yzerman is one of the best, maybe the best natural goal scorer in the entire draft class. He's a guy who, if he hits his ceiling and reaches his potential, is going to be a very effective goal scorer in the NHL. And for a team like the New York Islanders, who are in need of a top-line winger to play next to Matt Barzal and Bo Horvat, I think this is a really good gamble for them. I love this pick. Moving on now to the 21st overall pick, the Montreal Canadiens selected centerman Michael Hage out of the USHL. Had a very productive season this year, 33 goals and 75 points in 54 games. Just like the Demidov pick, I think Montreal again got very good value here with Michael Hage. Like I mentioned earlier, they had a fantastic first round in my opinion. 22nd overall, the Nashville Predators selected centerman Yegor Surin, who was one of the younger players in the draft class. He's got good size at the center position, impressive numbers in the MHL this season, especially in the playoffs. Solid value here for Nashville in my opinion. With the 23rd overall pick, a draft pick that Anaheim traded up for, they ended up selecting defenseman Stian Solberg. probably the most physical defender in the entire draft class. Not a whole lot of offensive upside there, but if he ever does become a full-time NHLer, should be an absolute nightmare to play against. 24th overall, Utah selected forward Cole Beaudoin, who's got good size, 6'2", over 200 pounds, was under a point per game this past season in the OHL for Barrie, 62 points in 67 games. Not a prospect I'm really all that familiar with. With the 25th overall draft pick, speaking of size, the Boston Bruins selected centerman Dean Letourneau, who is an absolute monster, 6'7", moves really well, and has a ton of skill for his size. He absolutely dominated this season, albeit in a weak league. He played for a private school in Ontario, but he's another guy like Celiev who's just an absolute unicorn and is definitely a really intriguing prospect. 26th overall, the LA Kings selected Liam Greentree out of the OHL, played for Windsor this season, and put up really impressive point totals, 36 goals, 90 points in 64 games. He's a big winger with a ton of skill. I think the Kings got pretty good value selecting Greentree 26th overall here. Next up, with the 27th overall selection, Chicago's third and final pick of the first round, they selected another winger out of the OHL, Marek Vanacker. Solid production this season for the Brantford Bulldogs, 36 goals, 82 points in 68 games. 28th overall, the Calgary Flames selected Russian winger Matvei Gridin, who spent the last 2 seasons in the USHL, had 38 goals and 83 points this season in 60 games. 29th overall, the Dallas Stars selected Finnish winger Emil Hemming, who had 11 points in 40 games in the Liga this season. On the Sportsnet broadcast, they compared him to Cole Yzerman in the sense that he has a great shot and he's a natural goal scorer, but there's a lot of other holes in his game. Sort of a high-risk, high-reward pick here for Dallas, but late in the first round, I think it's definitely worth a gamble, and Dallas is a team that has a pretty good track record of drafting in the late first round and early second round. Moving on now with the 30th overall selection, the New York Rangers selected right shot defenseman E.J. Emery, played 27 games for the U.S. National Development Team in the USHL this season, had just 6 assists in those 27 games. Not a ton of offensive upside there, projects to be more of, a physical defensive player. On the Sportsnet broadcast, they were raving about how impressive E.J. Emery was at the draft combine and how he was just blowing everybody away with the results he was getting on the different tests, so definitely an intriguing prospect. With the 31st overall draft pick, after moving down, the Toronto Maple Leafs selected right shot defenseman Ben Danford, who spent this season in the Ontario Hockey League for the Oshawa Generals, had a goal and 32 assists in 64 games. I'll reference the Sportsnet broadcast here again. They said that they wouldn't be surprised if this is a guy who's wearing a letter on his jersey in the NHL one day. The kind of player who goes out there and gives it his all every shift, goes to war for his teammates, not afraid to put his body on the line. If he's ever able to become a full-time NHLer, definitely sounds like he's the kind of player that the Maple Leafs could use on that blue line. And now finally, with the last pick of the first round, a pick that the Edmonton Oilers actually traded for to get into the first round. I believe they traded a conditional first rounder next year or either the year following. I'm not sure what exactly the conditions are, but it's basically a future first round pick in one of the next 2 drafts. And after acquiring this pick from the Flyers, the Edmonton Oilers used it to select winger Sam O'Reilly from the London Knights. Not a prospect I'm all that familiar with whatsoever, was part of that championship winning London Knights team this season, had 20 goals and 56 points in 68 games for them, 12 points in 16 playoff games. So those are the results of the first round of the 2024 NHL entry draft. As always, I want to know how you guys are feeling. How do you think your team did tonight in the draft? Let me know down below in the comments. Before we get out of here, there was one trade that took place earlier today that I'll give my quick thoughts on. The St. Louis Blues acquired forward Alexander Texier from the Columbus Blue Jackets in exchange for a 2025 4th round draft pick. This deal did come with an extension. Texier signed a 2-year deal with the Blues, a cap of $2.1 million per season. Not really a whole lot to unpack here. This is a buy low situation for the St. Louis Blues. Texier returned to the NHL this past season after stepping away for a year and playing in Switzerland in 2022-23. This season, Texier had 12 goals and 30 points in 78 games. He's a guy who's really only played bottom 6 minutes throughout his career so far. He definitely does have some skill. Decent playmaker, could bring some element of scoring to St. Louis's middle 6, but also could just be a non-factor for them. Not really a whole lot of risk involved here for St. Louis because they only gave up a 4th, and it's not like the extension they gave him was anything too crazy. So those are my quick thoughts on the Texier trade. Again, I want to know what you guys are thinking, especially if you're a fan of either the Blues or the Columbus Blue Jackets. Let me know your thoughts on this deal down below in the comments. If you guys made it all the way to the end of the video and you ended up enjoying yourself, please remember to hit that like button. It definitely does help out the videos a ton, and it's the best way to let me know that you enjoyed. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all year round, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all again soon.